have been too complacent. Look what we've allowed him to do. M103, C-16, all these, the bail-in law, all this crap that he's done. Okay, I can't even, there's so much of it, I can't.
I don't want people to have gone to war, to fight for rights, to other Canadians to hand over because they're complacent or lazy.
They want to control society, they want to control Canada, and they're going to do it with fear. Our fear feeds them, okay? This is why I will not fear them.
They don't care. They don't care about us, they don't care about you, and they don't care about your children.
This has all gone crazy. And why has it all gone crazy? Because people have been complacent.
Good people standing by doing nothing is how evil wins.
You cannot erase history by taking down some statues. It just can't be done.
Our sovereignty is broken. That's because of this illegitimate, de facto, morally bankrupt Trudeau government.
It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Okay, we don't have time left. Canada doesn't have time. We're out of time.
What we're fighting is the UN takeover of this country.
If you disagree with them, they'll call you names. If the names don't bother you, they'll assault you. They don't care. They don't have rules.
I want my rights. I want all of us to have our rights.
We're sick of being ruled. Okay? Being governed is one thing, but being ruled, no. This is where we're at, and this is what we have to fight, and this is what we're gonna fight and continue to fight. And I'm not giving up. I spent my whole life fighting bullies, so I really don't give a shit.
And welcome back to Ellie's Place. I'm here with Jason from ESTEY'S Crime Maze, and we are going to talk about the guilty plea made by Brian Kohberger in the IDAHO4 case. This is a very important part of the case because all of us, including the parents, wanted the trial. We wanted the evidence to be brought out. And they decided to go this route, and I think they went this route for a reason, but I'm going to let Jason start the show.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Ellie. And I know after we're done, as usual, you do amazing editing for my YouTube channel, and that's, of course, at ESTEY'S Crime Maze. And thank you for being an integral part of this channel and this journey with me together, Ellie. I really appreciate the opportunity, of course, today. And for all you Facebookers out there, of course, I go by Jason Estey. And Ellie and I, we're trying to bring truth and transparency, of course, to this case. Get digging in, and yeah, it's pretty amazing. The state has seemingly pulled the plug because I believe, and we're going to talk about it later, I'm sure, and get to it, that Brian Kohberger, he is part of state. He's a Fed, man. But it was very, very interesting. You know, we could go over, I've got written down some of the questions, of course, the judge asked Brian Kohberger. Kohberger stood up at one point. It was kind of funny, Ellie, I don't know if you saw when the judge said, well, you know, you don't have to stand. You should be seated. I know you're doing it out of respect. And you know, he's saying this while the judge knows, well, you're supposed to have done this quadruple unaliving. Judge probably doesn't even believe the nonsense. And on we can go. If you allow me, I'll read off some notes of the hearing if you want to hear it, and maybe the audience for those that are not up to speed. And if I may, I would like to read a comment or two that came in, one on my channel and one that just came in on the social media platforms, Ellie, that somebody sent to me, and it relates to the hearings, if that's cool.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. How about I start off with the comments real quick. Okay. Now, my friends, forgive me. Ellie looks very, very nice in her cool shades. Some people say I look like a Portuguese star in these shades. Love the Portuguese people. But anyway, I have a sty on my eye, so I digress. So I'm going to put these reading glasses on, folks. Try not to focus on the one eye. Now, listen to the information, folks, please. Here we go. This is from Jules with True, and I think it was supposed to stand for True Crime. Okay, it was a screenshot. Anyway, Someone sent it to me. For everyone who is claiming this actually did something, what questions were answered? And I think Ellie and I have a lot of the same questions, and I think some we can come up with answers. What case facts were proven? What evidence suddenly jumped out of nowhere to prove guilt? Did people suddenly forget that the PCA is outdated, irrelevant per state's own words, yet was read in court like the Bible? Question mark. This is not over, she says. Show me the evidence. Show me the facts. Explain the rise in Dan and Ethan's timeline. Explain the 8-hour delay. And the two non-sleeping adults, that's of course Dylan Morrison, Bethany Funk, folks, thought their friend was passed out from over drinking and chose to leave her home. By the way, and one other one that came in from, it's another channel creator, True Crime Design. Those of you that have followed this case, it's a pretty big channel. Many of you may have heard of it. The one issue I have with True Crime Design, like a lot of the others I have, is, and this is not to smash people. She does some really good work, but she believes the atrocity. Apparently, she really believes it happened, and she said this over and over. But she says, they really think they can MK Ultra Brian Kohlberger into accepting a plea deal, and this will all just go away? Unless Ann Taylor is somehow playing 4D chess. This is a disturbing development that betrays truth and justice. And one other final comment. This came on my channel, folks, this one. And I thought she deserves to have her comment read to the public. She goes by M-A-M-A-G, Mamaga-78. It was written about 4 hours ago, or maybe a day ago now. It says, I think one of the very few, so she's referring to me and indirectly to Ellie, because Ellie's a big part of my channel's success right now. She says, anyway, one of the few channels that ain't scared to point out the red flags. Glad to see you still have the same views as before these pleas. Not like most other channels who lost the balls. I will say about, only a handful are left who think outside the box. And that's exactly right, in my opinion. So how's that for first starting to, and then we can get more into the hearings of my notes if you want, Ellie, but I'd love to hear a few minutes of what's on your mind, at the forefront of your mind, and then we'll bounce our ideas off one another. And this is all for the audiences out there to learn what we think, our opinions, because it is our opinions, but the facts back at a lot of this up when you really think about it. Here we go.
Okay.
Thanks for allowing me to read those comments, Ellie.
No problem.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, you want me to go? Or were you going to?
Absolutely. You're ready, aren't you? You're ready. Yeah. It's your turn. Here we go.
Okay, so watching him plead yesterday seemed very contrived. It seemed very fake. To start with, a lawyer will always tell you show respect for the judge, like he did standing up. And then the judge said you could sit down. Okay. But when you are addressing a judge, it's either yes, Your Honor, or no, Your Honor. Not just yes, yes, yes. The tone of his voice did not sound like someone pleading guilty to 4 grisly murders.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, enter the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder?
Yes.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, kill and murder Madison Mogan, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
Did you, on or about that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Kaylee Gonzalez, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
And did you, on that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
And then on or about November 13th, 2022, again in Latah County, Idaho, did you kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being?
Yes.
Did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
It just seemed to me like it was a play being played out. Now, another thing is, why would his lawyer let him plead and not go through the trial? Because all she had to do was get a couple of jurors to see their point of view with all the inconsistencies and the idiocies of this case, the lack of DNA. You say she had her own DNA expert who made a monkey of the state. Mm-hmm. Why the plea? Well, I'll tell you why the plea. You see, this jig is up now. People are getting too close to the truth. They have to shut it down. Now, he pleads. Yes. Okay. Now, he goes off. We never see him again. The kids are gone. We never see them again. Now, this is in our opinions due to the facts of the case and the lack of facts in the case. I think this was all staged to avoid the trial, because if they did the trial, they would have to release the evidence of that trial.
Yes.
We would then get that evidence and be able to put it under fine microscopes, go through it with fine-tooth combs, and find the truth. They couldn't have that. They didn't seal this deal good enough. There's too many problems with this whole case. But in my opinion, your idea of what happened makes a lot more sense after this plea. They need to get rid of everybody.
All right.
Why wouldn't the state want the trial? Yeah. That would make great. Mm-hmm. That would make great MSN coverage if they did that. They actually put a ban on your one friend, and I'm using that term loosely, made point that they basically, how do you word it? Well, anyway, like he got around to that they were avoiding the trial because they didn't want the evidence shown. They didn't want the lack of evidence shown. And the public opinion would sway towards Kohberger and away from the state. They also have parents who are screwing everything up with every interview they do. They have cops using the exact same witness, apparently witnesses from the beginning, to rehash right before his plea. Now, like I say, they all go off in the sunset, go their own ways, and we will never be the wiser because we didn't get to see that trial. But my thoughts are this. Why wouldn't Brian Kohberger want that trial? Why wouldn't he rather take a chance of walking instead of, you see, he didn't just plead guilty. You remember they asked about that, did he read the paper that the Crown gave him, the prosecution gave him, that waived his rights to any appeals?
That's right.
He had to plead guilty to these grisly murders on paper, on file, and that he was not coerced or anything in any way. So that's going to eliminate any chance of people like the Innocence Project taking up his case.
You've heard the plea agreement that I talked about today. Do you agree with that plea agreement?
Yes.
And do you understand the nature of the charges that you've been charged with that I understand you're going to plead guilty today to?
Yes.
As I indicated, I'm not bound by the plea agreement, but the plea agreement is for the maximum on each count. Do you understand that I'm not bound by the plea agreement?
Yes.
Has anyone promised you that I would be lenient or easy on you if you pled guilty?
No.
Has anyone threatened you or anyone close to you to get you to plead guilty?
No.
Has anyone, other than the state's agreements with respect to the plea agreement, has anyone promised you anything in exchange for your plea agreement?
No.
Has anyone told you to be untruthful in answering my questions today?
No.
Has anyone offered you a reward of any kind other than the plea agreement in order to get you to plead guilty today? Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?
Yes.
And Mr. Kohlberg, you understand that by entering the guilty plea in this case, you would be giving up your right to appeal any decision this court made, as well as your sentence.
Yes.
Have you had enough time to decide whether or not to plead guilty?
Yes.
Are you pleading guilty freely and voluntarily?
Yes.
Given your choices, do you believe it's in your best interest to plead guilty?
Yes.
Have you discussed fully the matter of pleading guilty with your attorney, and are you satisfied with the advice you've received? Has your attorney advised you to your satisfaction about what your rights are, what your defenses may be, and what the possible consequences to you of your guilty plea are?
Yes.
Has your attorney done everything you've asked them to do?
Yes.
Are you satisfied with their representation of you?
Yes.
I have received a written guilty plea advisory questionnaire that is purported to be filled out by you. Did you fill that document out?
Yes.
Did you understand the questions that you answered in this document?
Yes.
And are the answers that are outlined in this document your answers?
Yes.
Are those answers truthful?
Yes.
Did you sign the document?
Yes.
And this document outlines many of the rights that you have in this case should you not plead guilty. Did you understand those rights?
Yes.
They include a right to a jury trial. Do you understand that?
Yes.
They include a right to the presumption of innocence. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You have the right to require the state to prove your guilt as to each element beyond a reasonable doubt. Do you understand that?
Yes.
They include a right to confront your accusers and cross-examine witnesses presented by the state, including by utilizing the subpoena power of the court to accomplish that. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You understand you would have a privilege against self-incrimination and a right to remain silent, meaning you would not be compelled to testify if you did not wish to, had you not pled guilty.
Yes.
You understand you're giving up that privilege and those rights that I've just outlined by pleading guilty.
Yes.
Do you understand those things the state would have had to have proven?
Yes.
And do you understand that by pleading guilty, the state no longer has to prove those things because you're admitting those things are true?
Yes.
They can't afford to have people like that looking into this case. You know who they are, right, Jason?
No, they should.
Have you seen the Innocence
Yes.
Project at work? Okay. They don't mess around.
Yes, there's one. Yeah, the one in Florida, I think that's based out of. That one I don't trust, but the other Innocent Project absolutely is the real deal for the most part. Absolutely.
They do not want these people sniffing around this case because too much, just too much.
No.
So the best way they could do is shut it down, have him sit there, and it's just the way he said yes every time he never. There was no change in voice. It was like he was just eager to say yes, yes, yes. Like, why? It wouldn't make sense.
Like robotic
for
almost, wouldn't it be?
Pardon me?
No, yeah.
I've
it
seen
was, it was almost
people
like,
say
wasn't
no.
it robotic?
No, it seemed like he was excited to say it, to get it over with. That the tone of his voice
that's
was
true.
not solemn. If I was pleading guilty to 4 grisly murders, I would be like, yes, Your Honor. I put my head down. Yes, Your Honor. I would not be like, yes.
Hold on right there.
Yes,
Yeah, right. Well, Ellie. Yeah, you would, Brian Kohlberger, wouldn't you, if you were in his position, you would be scared shitless. You know what's going to happen to your PhD criminology student, even if though you've never done any hardcore jail time. If you're, and let's say he's not part of the feds, but you would be afraid you're going into the penitentiary, as the judge brought up, right? Some facility penitentiary. We will never see it. I don't think he's going to be going into regular penitentiary. That's for damn sure. He's going to be working for the feds, the government, or something. We'll talk about that maybe later. But he would be scared, man. You're going to get brutalized. He's not going to escape getting touched by other inmates on death row for a quadruple on alive in Moscow, Idaho, an international case. Are you kidding me? And so yet you're going to be scared that one day you might get, shot by guns, and yet you have an opportunity to go to trial and actually prove your innocence. And Ann Taylor didn't, Ellie, I'm almost certain during the hearing, she said, we will not plead guilty. She was adamant, of course, right? So it's all lies. It's all theater.
It's all theater.
Unfortunately, it is.
I can't make heads or tails of why but just the way he pled, it sounded contrived, like they practiced it in the back, and then he was just eager to get through it.
I bet they did.
Anyone, even guilty people, would say, no, fuck you, I want the trial, right? Very few will pass up on the trial, and they will not sign their rights to appeal away. I've never heard anyone signing their appeal rights away. Even Bundy didn't, and he was guilty as fuck. So, they don't want an appeal, because that would bring this case back in the limelight again. No. They have to quiet everything down and get rid of everybody. The gig is over. Too much heat's coming down because of not only YouTubers and online personalities, but the mainstream press fuck-ups, the parents fuck-ups, especially admitting that Maddie just bought a house. She just bought a house?
Yes.
Right? So all these things are
exactly.
fuck-ups that they need to get rid of, because we're questioning too much. Those three guys in the park, everyone's starting to question those guys now, and they should be. That was the shadiest, crappiest police work I've ever seen. I don't even think Barney Fife could fuck up that bad. Sorry for the language, but you're at Ellie's place, and I got potty mouth disease. So this seemed very fake to me. What about you? What did you think when you were watching it?
I had much the same feelings and thoughts as you on it, Allie, and I just kept saying to myself what I've been saying over and over again when I believe I learned the truth of this case with some research and listening to a handful of others, right? Mm-hmm. And you and I bouncing our ideas off of one another, of course, too, when researching. I just kept saying extraction removal operation, PSYOP. Like you said, they had to cover this up. They don't want you to be focused on the real truth of what went down on November 13, 22. This all-important case where the FBI gets to collect, eventually Brian Kohlberger's DNA, which they can, again, create these loopholes, right? They can make, again, obtaining information illegally, like the DNA that they did illegally, and make it legal through court proceedings. Now it's going to be set for possibly as precedent of how they go about being able to get DNA under certain circumstances, even if the person, God forbid, is innocent. Hello. And God forbid, if you're a whistleblower coming out with information, exposing corruption in the government, could they set you up, the deep state, with, how they collect someone's innocence DNA? Potentially. So these are just one aspect of why this case is so important. And I believe is a social media experiment that we saw going on, Ellie, with, disinformation agents, of course, and certain creators that I believe were throwing deliberately misinformation, disinformation. Some were just sellouts. Others, I know a few by name that I think, well, I won't say it now today, but I've mentioned them before that I believe were disinformation.
I think people know.
Pardon?
People have been watching everybody.
Yeah, I think people know.
Right. Smart people.
And more people will know as time, and more people will know as time goes on. So those were my thoughts, and I thought that they're cowards. The word, I said in the last interview, the word cowards comes to mind. They, even if they had their own impetus for the cover-up, the fact that they took so much taxpayers' money, right, and using CIA corporate media, lie after lie after lie after lie, not including, and that doesn't even include my theory that the atrocity didn't even take place. There's no evidence that it took place. But all the other lies, too. I mean, come on, but we're going to know the truth. The more videos come out, and I'm not going to be the only one. You're in with this journey too, LA, until we want to shut it down. But we know it's not, the whole IDAHO4 has not shut down yet. we can continue as long as we want to show the importance and provide this information, and the trial or whatever the next hearing will be, we can look forward to that as well. And other creators, I believe, and they have a responsibility. If you really want truth and justice, let's talk about it. Let's at least bring up the possibility, a real strong possibility, that the biggest lie in this case was the tragedy never happened. It was a staged crime scene, and I'll get into that again in future videos to really bring it home for people. And I love to be interviewed, like by you, Ellie. I love it, and I want to be interviewed, hopefully get a chance, like with Tommy Jude, he gave me an opportunity, and hopefully others will have some courage and want to interview. And I think it will be fun, and we'll get more, continue to bring truth and awareness like we're doing, you and I.
Can I leave a prediction with you?
Sure.
Brian Kohlberger is going to get Jeffrey Epstein.
Really?
That's how they're going to get rid of him.
Really?
New identity, out the back door. See ya. They can give him a facelift.
Yes. Oh, I thought you were meaning Epstein, as in that
No,
they
he's
killed
gonna get
Epstein for real.
alive in prison. And it's going to happen pretty soon.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So Brian Kohlberger, if I'm right that he's a... So go ahead.
No, either he gets...
Go ahead.
Someone else does it to him or he does it to himself. He's going to be unalived in prison very soon. That's my prediction.
Well, that's interesting. I never thought of that. I always thought, I take it, Ellie, that because I believe strongly that, and that's another thought that I had in the hearings, when you study the Brian Kohlberger and, again, how they embed some of these guys in high academic positions, they groom them. And in this case, it wasn't just grooming some wannabe PhD criminology student. He literally tried to enroll, right, in the police department. So if I'm right and he was an intelligence asset, sure, they could get rid of him if they really wanted to. But I think it's clear as day that he signed an agreement. And if the feds stick to it, right, the real power structure, the people in control of what's happening, they're going to allow him, as you say, it won't be a real unaliving. We'll be told that he's been Epstein. We could be told that. But in reality, he will be gone, as your first statement was, elsewhere. They will relocate him, and he will have a job and another assignment, maybe exposing corruption. That is the real rabbit hole of this case, folks, that most people do not look at or refuse to look at. But this is throughout history, everybody. They use people like this for assignments. And I think that's I think that's what we saw in a way, in the trial. It was so fake, like you described how Brian's answering, and he's got to be working, I believe, for the feds, man, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's your opinion.
But I could be wrong.
I just think it this way. Your friend said that Brian Kohlberger will be going into prison as a hitman, and he will be respected. But what this person doesn't know, because he probably hasn't never been there, is that there's a lot of guys in there who have wives, sisters, mothers, aunts, daughters. Mm-hmm. They don't like guys who kill chicks, especially 3 beautiful young girls who are in school. Now this going on the pretense of this creator. So
a huge creator, a big creator, by the way.
He will not be revered in there as a hitman. He will be on the hit list of a lot of guys who, very much like with child predators, they want them gone. And I'm thinking either somebody unalives him or he unalives himself. He's not going to be able to use that name anymore anyway. His job is done. The plea is done. They can now shuffle all this shit out, and we'll never know the difference, they think.
That's right.
So my thoughts are
But
this.
remember,
If this is a real deal, that boy's going to be hunted in prison. He's not going to be revered by anybody.
That's right. That's right. But those are great thoughts, Ellie. But remember, Brian was very relaxed. Would you not agree? He looked almost joyful. We almost said that before we went live today. Why? Why was Ann Taylor just, they're like buddies, right? Ann Taylor smiling, and I know they've been through this process of the hearings for months and months, but it didn't it didn't equate to real normal reality. Why would Brian Kohlberger, again, this is not some, I don't mean to use the word retard in a bad way, but he's not retarded by any means. He's the opposite. Criminology, again, PhD student, right? They went over some of his education, I think, briefly in this hearing as well. And I want to read off some of the prosecution. What he said, Thompson, was ridiculous. But Brian was relaxed. It was like, again, you read between the lines, right? It was like Brian knows the next step of his life. And he ain't worried about what you just said, going to prison and being on a hit list. He would know if he's really going to be on a hit list. If you're really going in the penitentiary, a facility with other inmates, and you're at risk, Brian would be scared to death. And we didn't see that at all. We didn't hear that at all. What we got was, as one woman said, Ellie, what we got was the appearance. Apparently he had you could see it, his hair was shaved buzzed to the side, which is, I don't know if you know it, Brian has never looked this way.
No.
Right. But a woman said that buzzing of the hair, she thinks, and I think, again, the feds are very slick, that they did that on purpose to make some of the mainstreamer media, and probably the sellouts, whatever, make people think, and public, oh my God, he looks hard, he looks cold. Like Tony Bruschi, him and the guest, they said look at his eyes, it looks cold. And the guest said he looks like a shark. And no talk of that he could be innocent, right? They're all in that he's guilty. And so the woman, I thought it was interesting with the appearance of the hair. So these are all subtle things. But the main thing is Brian's own behavior. He's relaxed. He knows, my point is, Ellie, in my opinion, that he is most likely going to go off to another facility. And it ain't the penitentiary, folks. This is how extraction, relocations, intelligent assets that are involved intimately in a big theater like this, like Ellie and I think, it's all, anyone can see it. This is how somebody like Brian will go out the back door, as Ellie said earlier. That's what I think is going to happen. We'll see. But we certainly will never see Brian again, one way or another. And I will never believe if they say that he's been stabbed in prison, unless we see authentic autopsy photos. It didn't happen, folks. I'll never believe it.
They can fake autopsy photos. My sister does
sure.
makeup she did makeup for war reels and shit. They can just put some wounds on them, get them laying on the table, and they can even get a dummy. Anyway, so no, right. They're going to get rid of him. He has to be gone. So the only way they could do that was the way they did it, right? And that's why I think the next step is he got unalived or unalived himself in prison. Now, he didn't seem suicidal to me. He seemed excited. No. He seemed upbeat, and that's rare for someone.
Absolutely.
4 grisly murders, if this is true.
Yeah, grisly.
So I don't know. Even myself, I would be sick to my stomach to have to say yes. Even if I was guilty of it, I'd have to be sick to my stomach to say yes.
Absolutely.
So the whole fact that they don't want a trial is a dead giveaway for your theory.
It is. Totally agree. Thank you, Ellie. I agree. By the way, I thought you might be interested to hear a little bit of this in case you didn't hear it, Ellie, or if you did, you can hear it a second time. Hopefully you don't mind in the audience. If I can read my own writing, if it's cool, I'll say this, okay? Thompson says, one of the many things he said, of course, in the hearing the other day, he says, the weapon wasn't found. Yeah, no shit. Meaning the knife, right?
Yeah.
Searching, nothing evidentiary was found, of course, he says. After and that was 6 to 8 weeks, I believe he said, after the killing. So he's inferring that, of course, you'd have time to maybe hide the weapon. I guess you could speculate, maybe even clean up the DNA, because he talked about the cleanup of the car, right? That doesn't include, they only found a little speck of his DNA, if you believe that, on a knife sheath, right? Which we've been over, and we should got to keep going over that. Planted, exactly. They do the stupid trash pickup apparently in front of his house. We've never seen the body cams of all that stuff.
That was their smoking gun, because nobody could explain how his DNA would have got there. I can. A cop put it there.
Exactly.
How long after it happened did they arrest him?
That's a great question, and I forget. I believe it was. I can't wait till we see it in the comments, especially if it's not on this comment on this platform when you edit it on my YouTube. I think it was a couple months. It's just a couple months. So it happened in November, and Kohberger was arrested. I want to say, I believe January, sometime after Christmas.
He said they followed him home 1,000 kilometers plus, right? To
Yes,
Pennsylvania
yes,
or
they
whatever.
did.
So.
Yes, they sure did, to his father's house, yes.
Okay. Well, that would explain why they didn't
And the
find him
state,
after 2 months.
sure. The state, and his car was all dirty. A lot of people thought that was very strange. His car was extremely dirty and all that. The state, Thompson, though, says, again, this prosecutor, in my opinion, complete liar. You know, he's out to lunch, this guy, on this whole case, but he's got a job to do. The state was present to the jury. This was part of the defendant's plan in covering up the crime, he says. The defendant has studied crime. Here's the psyop part, my friends, I almost like to describe. He studied crime. The fact that he did a detailed paper on crime scene processing. We're not going to tell you that I think Brian Kohberger was a fed, and they probably did that on purpose. But anyway, crime scene processing when he was working on his pre-doctorate degree. And he had that knowledge and skill, Thompson says. The state suggests that evidence, and this is the overview that we have presented to you in court, he says, which is consumed for weeks and is prepared to do just as defendant admitted and pleaded guilty, something like that. And then speaking to the judge here, Ellie, going to the judge, Judge Hitler, of course, he had a lot to say in the hearings, as you know, and went over the legalities, you know, and had the documents all reading off for the most part, right? Mm. But the judge asked Ann, I thought this was interesting, because you brought up the discovery in our last interview, I believe, Ellie, when you said, well, again, they would have Brian dead to rights if he really did this or didn't do it. We would see the video evidence, because there's surveillance, as we discussed over and over again, around the house, as Steve G even admitted, even though we both, I think, don't trust Steve G. I know I don't, but I trust him when he said that. Yeah. The feds had surveillance. So anyway, Ann Taylor says yes, because, the judge asked, Ann, did you do all the discovery you felt necessary? Ann Taylor says yes. So where are all the videos, as I was just saying, showing that Brian Kohberger went in the house that night with the knife? That would be my question, right? Judge asked Kohberger questions. Make sure your pleas are given voluntary. You may have mentioned this earlier, Ellie, and I want to make sure that that he actually committed the crime, the judge says, that you say you did and are guilty of, because I don't want you to plead guilty to a crime you didn't commit. Yeah, no kidding, right? And then, are you pleading guilty because you were guilty? And of course, Brian, I'm pretty sure he stood up at that point, or maybe he was still seated at that point. He says, yes. Brian, as you said earlier, by the way, Ellie, as said by the judge, cannot appeal what happened that day of the statements, I guess, made today. Judge said so many words. Brian may have to, I laughed at this part to myself, Ellie. He has to pay, possibly will pay restitution. Naturally, if he really did the crime, you're going to pay restitution to victims. I believe that's, I think, $5,000 per victim. You'd think they deserve a hell of a lot more than that. Are you pleading guilty because you were guilty? The judge says, and again, Brian says yes. And judge says, if for some reason you don't accept your plea, if it is possible, your statements today can be used against you at trial. Do you understand that? Kohberger stands up, and Hitler says, do you understand that? The judge says, why don't you take an oath? Or why don't you take an oath? So eventually he took an oath. Remember, I think at the beginning of the hearings or at some point, Brian is, swearing upon, and they did what they're supposed to do in a real, if you believe, again, Brian is, for some reason, wanting to plead guilty, which is insane, as we talked about. There's no good reason that I see, if Brian really did a crime or not, there's no logical reason at this stage of the game why you would plead guilty. Exactly. But everything that was said by the judge over the legalities, right, it makes Brian Kohberger, again, this evil guy, and that this evil guy is, saying he's admitting, I did it. I stabbed them all. I had, and wait till you get this verbiage here, by the way. So he's fined up to $50,000 for the burglary, count one. Okay, fined up to $50,000. But I wanted to read this because count two, period of incarceration up to life imprisonment. I'm trying to get to the part where it really brings home what happened here. One sec. It's on the next page, I believe.
While you're doing that, I just want to thank Brenda and Candace and Cat
Sure.
Best for being here.
All
Sorry
right.
to interact right now. We're in the middle of.
You have a right to a jury. You have the right to presumption of innocence. Do you understand that? The judge asked Kohlberger. Of course, he responds, yes. You have the right for the state to prove that you're guilty. We know beyond a reasonable doubt, he says. Each element beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay. Do you understand that? Kohlberger says yes. He's saying yes to it all, folks, right? You have a right to examine your accusers. What's that?
It was too eager.
Too eager. And yet he has a right to examine or go after his accusers, and as said, right, and in the witnesses. But he's still pleading guilty. Brian answers yes. The final thing I really wanted to get to here on the notes was this. Let's see if I could just get it right here. What the judge said. Here it is, and this is so much hammer, but it's important. As the count of burglary, the state would have to prove that on or about November 13, 2022 in Moscow, Idaho, you unlawfully entered a residence in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit a felony crime of murder. As to count two, the state would have had to prove on the same day in Latah County, Idaho, that you did willfully and unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice. You hearing this, Brian Kohlberger and your family? And forethought. Kill and murder Madison Mogen, a human being. That's literally what he said. Rightly so, the judge, right? Stabbing Madison Mogen, by which she died. Then as to count three, the state also has to prove in Latah County, the same address, that you willfully and lawfully, deliberately, with premeditation, malice, and forethought killed Kaylee Gonzalez, a human being. And then he said, by stabbing, right? And he said this exact same thing for, of course, Ethan Chapman, respectfully, and Xander Canuto. If you think Brian Kohlberger did any of this, I think you are absolutely naive, and you've just watched corporate lamestream media. You have absorbed the brainwashing and mind control. You've bought into the belief system, and that's all it is, my friends. And you've not done your research. So that's why we have these YouTube amazing sleuths out there and amazing truthers like Ellie, who's digging in, and so many more. And as you say, Ellie, I think you inferred partly because of us, the community, we shut them down, or they're shutting themselves down, acting cowardice to shut this whole thing down.
People are doing too many shows, bringing up too many things that are making the case look like a joke. So they shut it down really quick. All of a sudden, okay, you ready to plea? Yeah, okay. 2 days later, yeah, I'll plead guilty. Yeah. I know, I'm sorry. And the fact that he signed that paper, now what that paper does, that seals the deal. Like the judge said, you cannot appeal, you cannot fight this in the future. You have admitted you did with malice kill all four people, and that's the end of it. There's not going to be any. And he went, yes. So nobody facing those kind of charges would be enthusiastic to say yes, but would not accept those terms, because everybody wants to appeal once they get sentenced. That's the first thing your lawyer will tell you. Don't worry, we'll get it on appeal, right?
That's right.
So
that's right.
The fact that he signed away his appeal, that's finalized. So why would he do that? That's silliness.
Yeah,
especially in a case with so many holes. Swiss cheese looks like solid compared to this case. Seriously.
Yeah.
I've never seen a case so weak.
Does Ann Taylor...
We're gonna have to
do
look.
You think, Ellie, because of all these... What's that?
We need to look into her and her past cases.
No, for For sure. I was going to ask you though, on this case, and we will look into her past. She's represented gangbangers. She's all part of this corrupt system, Ann Taylor, in my opinion. But, well, there's no doubt about it. But Ann Taylor, do you think she would shy away from interviews and having to ask or answer these hard questions and discrepancies that we're bringing up, Ellie? That's all in her face. Ann Taylor, why would you allow Brian Kohlberger to accept that? She's going to have to answer some of these questions very soon, is she not? On why
Not if they're
what went
never
down.
asked. Not if they're never asked. You can try and reach out to her and see what she says. Like
Maybe I'll interview her with your help.
Yeah, like, I'll even reach out to her too, because the point is, she won't do interviews because she can't back up this bullshit. She's a part of it, in our opinion.
That's right.
Right.
In our opinion.
So,
yes.
In my opinion, this is just such a contrived piece of shit. And now they're just, and I fully understand why the families are upset in one regard. But
what's that?
Usually the families would prefer not to have a trial and prefer a guilty plea. But these families in particular wanted a trial. Or actually, Steve G did. But
so he says,
I imagine he's speaking for the rest of them too when they're disappointed that there was no trial. Why? Because they're under question too. Now they've got to explain to the community their side of things. There's never going to be any validation of their side of things because there was no trial.
That's
there
right.
Can't be a trial.
Well,
There's
to your
no
point.
Show.
No, to your point. To your point, Ellie, Steve G. That's right. We'll show this video clip sometime, Ellie. I hope you will. That Steve G, from his own words, he's doing all these interviews right now, right? And the other family members, the pressers, right? You got Ethan Chapman's family. He thought it was very kind of red flags. They're using a lawyer, right? On the steps there speaking, I believe. But
that was a lawyer.
Steve G,
they didn't even come in person. They sent a lawyer to do it for them. That was not a parent. That was a lawyer for the parent.
Thank you. That's it. Exactly. That's what I meant. And
I don't think
Steve G, he said, no, but here's part of the brainwashing. So Steve G just wants you to take his word for it right now, like he's always said, right, that they had plenty. He just said this. They had plenty of evidence on Brian Kohlberger. We know they had plenty of evidence. Oh, do we know that, Steve G? Do we? Show us one sliver of evidence other than the touch DNA skin cells on the button staff that they claim. Show us the evidence that this Brian Kohlberger, who I still think worked with the feds as part of the perfect distraction, show us that he went in that house, Steve G. We didn't see it. We haven't shown that evidence, Steve G. Where's all the other evidence, Where's all the other DNA that would have been left and or in the car most likely? There's nothing. And by the way, Steve G, there's no motive for any particularly like a lone wolf to do this. There might have been other motivations with some gangbangers, perhaps some fortunes we talked about, because they had it out for the parents who may have been snitches, right? But to actually, again, carry out this hit, there's no evidence, absolutely no evidence that a crime actually took place other than staging. And we can always discuss that, in my opinions. Again, they didn't treat it like a health hazard, for starting with number one. I could go over a whole list, but that's not what we're here, I guess, to discuss exactly.
No, you beat that dead horse to death. But no, we need to keep up on the current stuff, because right now, I'm telling you right now, I feel in my heart my prediction's going to come true. So
that Brian's going to be unalived for real?
Yeah. No, that even if they say he unalived himself or say he was unalived, scooch him out the back door.
Yes. Absolutely. Totally agree. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's probably it. Kathleen Ramsland, by the way. So just real quick on the propaganda right after the hearings, Ellie, just to get people up to speed, and they might find it interesting, at least some people. Kathleen Ramsland, the famous forensic psychologist scientist or forensic psychologist, right? She's got like 75 books out or something. She had to finally make a public statement. It's only been twice, I think, that she's ever done it. She comes on And she says, again, I think you can already tell I don't trust what she said, but Kathleen comes on News Nation, which is just CIA, corporate media, right? It's largely controlled by CIA. And it's a new news media. It's only been around for a year. I've been paying attention to News Nation. But anyway, and saw the following. We all know, everybody's in this field, criminology, forensic psychology, know that he can have students, that he can have students who might become offenders. But we all know the majority, the vast majority, are not, they're not, and instead go into law enforcement, FBI, Secret Service, that make, it's going to get better, everyone, just stay with me, that make life better to protect us. So we always know there is a risk that we're attracting somebody who wants to do something terrible. Hopefully, we will never have to face that. But here's what she says, my friends. But in my case, I did. And Lana from Truth or Transparency right there, she goes, what? That's ridiculous. Again, she's referring to Kathleen Ramsland is hinting, basically telling the world that she thinks that because Brian pleaded guilty, right, we now have to believe that Brian, that she may have played a role in Brian Kohlberger doing. No, I would say, Kathleen, don't you know, Kathleen? You start with, again, stage crime scene. What about if Brian Kohlberger is actually a Fed, Kathleen? Have you ever thought about that? He wanted to enroll law enforcement. He's set up as this perfect distraction, Kathleen. Anyway, I think Kathleen knows a lot more truth about this case than she'll ever let on, right? Thanks for listening to that, folks.
Yeah, no, I really think.
But we're going to get more propaganda. What's that?
Well, I just really think things are going to come to a head soon. They're going to have to.
Can't wait.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of people who just bailed on him because of this guilty verdict, but they're not looking at the bigger picture. They're not looking at how it was given. They're not looking at just all of it. The fact that he signed that paper that no other person would sign. And he was just so eager to admit to these crimes. Why?
Yes.
That's what doesn't make sense at all. It should be somber, but I mean, he was almost like, before the judge even finished talking, yes, yes, right? Like, I don't know. It just seemed fake to me.
Yes.
Very, very fake.
No, I'm glad you're bringing that up. It's not real human behavior that would take place. I don't think ever with an intelligent person, in this circumstance. I totally agree with you. By the way, one more thing about, sorry?
No, go ahead.
Thank you. Kathleen Ramsfield, the forensic psychologist, they showed how News Nation would work, right? They show, sure enough, Brian Kohlberger at some point in a clip wearing an orange jumpsuit as Kathleen is getting to the point where she's suggesting that she may have played a role that, Brian Kohlberger, after all, he's the guilty one, right? He committed. But she said, another thing she said, she was asked by the reporter, what things sort of raised your eyebrows in that class? Because again, everyone, Kathleen, those of you that don't know, she taught Brian Kohlberger, and it wasn't even a full semester, I don't think, something like that. She goes, her reply is, I think that the idea of wanting to study offenders, when the thought proven was, how they felt about the crimes, wanting to study that, then they showed a picture of Kohlberger. She says, this is a person that is now saying he's guilty of doing these things. I have to look at the framework of what I thought, this is Kathleen, and whether I inspired him in some way, because I cannot guess that. She says, and that's when Lana says, yeah, what? That's ridiculous. So Kathleen thinks that she may have inspired Brian Kohlberger, because again, remember the mainstream media narrative for the longest time and some of the disinformation agents, he's an incel. He did it. He must have did it because he hated the women, or he loved them, but he hated them, and he wanted to commit murder. So you're going to murder somebody that you actually adore, these two women, that being Kaylee and Madison. They had to go run with that for a little while, first year and a half or something, and other people ran with that nonsense, and it just, yeah. And then the prosecution had to admit, hello, no, there was no motive. But we still they want you to believe that Brian's pleaded guilty, so he still did it, even though there was no motive, no identifiable connection he had to the victims, the family, the residents, or even the community. He went to Washington State, folks. Those of you, especially that are not familiar with this case, and even if you are, please understand it was all part of the convenient narrative. And if you don't think Brian was an intel asset and aware of a lot of what was going to happen and what is happening now, again, I think you're naive. I think he agreed to this. And as Ellie said, he'll be out that back door. This is not your normal crime, crime, that's for sure.
Don't you find it odd, and not only odd, but a conflict of interest, that she was the coroner for this case, being she knows him?
Oh, Kathleen. No, you're referring now to Kathleen Mabbitt. That's a whole different person.
That's the coroner, right? That one that just did that speech, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Don't you think it's odd?
No, the speech I just did had a similar. No, the person, that I mentioned has a similar name. If I haven't butchered the forensic psychologist name, that's a whole different woman. She.
They're just interviewing his teacher, then, right?
Yes, his teacher, exactly, professor.
She wasn't on this case. Okay. I thought you were saying she was the coroner for this case. Because the names are similar.
No. Yes, they are. Yeah.
Okay. I just got mixed up there. I thought that was kind of weird that they would have.
Yeah, that'd be wild, right?
Because that would be a conflict of interest, you think. But,
for sure.
Okay.
I would think so.
That's my bad. I misunderstood.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So again, everyone. Yeah, when you understand how the feds work, we'll do videos on this more, but the narrative is so tight, right? It's the psyop. You got Brian and this PhD criminology student happens to have a first semester with this famous forensic psychologist, right? And we've been fed that there's no motive, but he must be an incel and all this and hates women. It's just all pre-planted narrative, in my opinion, and why? Because again, I don't believe the crime scene really happened. There was no crime scene. Yes, the students, they're gone. But they're not, in my opinion, underground, as I've always said. They are alive and gone. Pardon?
If there was 4 murders, then she is the worst lawyer on the friggin' planet. Literally the worst lawyer on the fucking planet. She sold him out or allowed him to sell himself out. That's just what keeps me thinking that what you're saying is more viable. Simply because of the evidence we're being given. Like they're trying to feed us bullshit with a silver spoon, and we can see it's stainless steel.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not silver.
It's vile. It is. Right? It's such a circus.
I know we're totally onto them, yet they're still pushing the bullshit. And now they shut it all down. Just like a neat little package. Bam, bam, bam. Okay.
Yeah. And Ann Taylor, Ellie, as you know, she's made a lot of money. And she's loving making this money. So you're going to shut down making money and publicity and fame and more. Yeah, and more importantly, you're going to shut it down to continue to. You were just acting, Ann. You were like you were. It was almost like Brian was your son, as people were saying. The way you cajoled him, you hugged him, you showed humanity with one another. You're defending him with all your conviction, and then where's the excuse, Ann, for now allowing him to just plead guilty? She's going to have to answer, I believe, some hard questions because she lives in the public. At least I think she does. She's in small town Moscow, Idaho, or wherever she lives, but she's in the public. It'll be very interesting. Or will she just, have to move to isolated area? I don't know, right? I'll be paying attention. Maybe we can interview Ann Taylor, though. You never.
Lawyers don't usually have too much of a problem. It's
okay.
It's usually being that she's involved with protecting Aryan members. I would say she probably was well protected in that area, so I don't think she'd have to move or anything.
Well said. Yeah, I never thought of that. Absolutely, good point. And I like Ann Taylor overall. I just wish, I wish she wasn't having to be, or maybe she chose to be this actor in all this theater, again, as the defender for, Brian Kohlberger, She's a well-known public defender. She's good at what she does. And, was this all pre-planned as part of the narrative that Ann Taylor will be chosen to represent Brian Kohlberger and we'll go on with the script sort of deal? And, she obviously will know all the details of what really went happen. Again, what happened on November 13th, besides the two roommates being untouched, what really happened to those four?
Yeah, no, I can't see any other possibility other than it's real. And this was the worst fucking pre-trial in history with the worst lawyer in history, or it's a fucking psyop, man. And now they have to shut it down because everyone's getting too close. And the families wanted a trial. Why? Why are they acting like they wanted a trial? Most families I know would rather have the guy plead guilty and not go through the trial, not have it describe what happened to their child in front of the whole world. That's bringing up the trauma all over again. So why would they want that trial? These are all things that are irking me, right?
Totally agree. I never thought of that, Ellie. And the gut firing squad, again, it takes, how many years is it going to take before he's even shot? Maybe only a couple of years, or maybe it'll be 10, 15 years. I don't think that's ever.
No, he avoided the death penalty. It's off the table now. But
okay, but I'm saying if he didn't plead guilty, is what I meant to say. If he didn't plead guilty, right? The firing squad, potentially, if you're found guilty in a trial, it's never been even discussed. How many years down the road would that be? Probably quite a few years before it could possibly even happen. And you, Brian Kohlberger, I got news for you. I'm only just going to pretend that you're not working with the feds in any capacity. You're not deliberately used as this perfect distraction. You think you're going to live a decent or even a life that you want to live after quadruple unalivings that you've been accused of? You're going to I've never been to a hardcore penitentiary. I've been to prison before, but not, I know you know a lot more about the justice system, Ellie, in prisons than I do probably, but I would think you would agree Brian is going to be a marked man, as will be talked about many times, if it's real, right? If he's really going to a penitentiary, which I don't believe, but let's just say he is. So why would you plead guilty? You know this, Brian. You're not a stupid man. You would have been fed this by the lawyer, right? Ann Taylor knows what to expect, that he would be brutalized, man. They're going to get to him. Come on. And the guards, you think the guards are going to give him a life? Sir?
From his perspective, how stupid what he did is, if he had gone through the trial and lost the trial, he could get a new trial through the Innocence Project. Because there's enough trolls in this case, like I said, they can make mincemeat of this fucking cops and prosecutors.
That's right.
So, no, this is all fake. I'm telling you, it's theater.
Fake.
I feel it in my heart. And it's my opinion,
and
but I think this is theater.
I hope a lot of people, Ellie, and I don't think this part takes courage of YouTube creators, say what Ellie just told you, that in your opinions, I hope you'll think this, folks, that you, in your opinions, you think this looks like and is complete theater. And what was the other word used? Theater and
psyop.
Psyop, as we said in another word. Well, you could say joke, but more importantly, psyop. And again, everyone, if you go to my past videos, I define to you what a psyop is and the different types. Once you understand what a psyop is, and I know it can be helpful because my famous activist friend Jane Scarf, as Ellie knows her very well, in Canada here during COVID, even Jane thanked me for teaching her what a psyop is. It got her over all the fear that she used to always have, she said, in all the different incidents, with chaos agents, the government out there. She no longer has that fear, and it put her on a whole new path. And she keeps thanking me to this day just because I taught her what a psyop is, from my understanding research. And once people get that, this relates to the IDAHO4 and what Ellie and I are talking about right now and what I believe happened on November 13th as well in some ways. And again, you have tactical, operational, strategic, but Ellie may not want me to define exactly what a psyop is in 2 minutes right now.
I could, since you're talking about it. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Well, thanks. Again, and some people, you can find some of this definition yourself, and I will add my own flavor as well. It's any activity that's practiced mainly by psychological methods By the way, there's three different names, as I've said before, hearts and minds. You've heard of propaganda, of course, psychological operations, right? And again, any activity that's practiced mainly by psychological methods with the aim of elucidating or evoking, think about the IDAHO4, a planned psychological reaction in another person. This highly emotionally charged narrative. Atrocity took place, stabbing. Anyway, and when you take selected information, again, and indicators to an audience to affect your emotions, your value systems, your belief systems at times. Think about perception management, right? We're seeing all of this take place, folks, and objective reasoning. And again, it can be targeted to individuals we know and groups. And by the way, everyone, a PSYOP, just like I mentioned Canada earlier, every sovereign nation is a very important part. Right there in the United States, where this case took place, Ellie, is a very important part of the U.S. military and economic interests. Mm-hmm. Think PSYOP. Again, the governments conduct it. The deep state conducts different PSYOPs to try to control the masses, often, right? Perception management. They use corporate media and other means. And it can be used to usurp confessions. That's one of the questions I'm sure people will be asking, Ellie, and has been asked a little bit now, is where is the videotapes? Apparently I was wrong. Brian did eventually get interrogated. But that would be in the discovery with Anne too, right? We're never going to see, now they shut that down, we most likely will never see, okay, where was this interesting interrogation? I'm sure it would be of Brian Kohlberger. And what did he say, you know? And the military usurps confessions by using, again, different PSYOPs. So I hope that's helpful to some of you out there. If it is, great. Feel free to leave me a comment. I hope it is. And I think it is very, very important for some people to understand that, you know, for a lot of us. It was important that I understood it. And I'm no longer feared up, you know, with a lot of what goes on. It's frustrating at times, you know, but I think it'll help us deal with our anxiety at times that we normally feel, to understand, well, wait, that's just a PSYOP, right? That's a PSYOP, that's a PSYOP. And a lot of this isn't real. This is, Ellie said, this is theater, folks. Yeah. Let's look at real reality too. But
definitely, you know, like I said,
thank you for letting me.
If you look at anything with common sense in this case, I mean, like I said, at first I laughed when you came up with this theory.
I know, you laughed.
As I went through your list and I investigated some stuff, that's when it becomes to realize, yeah, this very much seems like a PSYOP. And the more we've gone on, the more we found out through other creators. Thank God for all of them. I wish I could mention them all. Maybe I will in the credits.
Yes. That'd be
even
great.
The ones you didn't like. They have provided us with details that we wouldn't have had to put this theory together.
Yes.
Well, you did. But
yes.
So when I looked at it and I investigated it, that's when it kind of hit me. It's exactly what this is. And now that they've done this with the plea, I'm more convinced than ever this was one big PSYOP.
Yeah.
Again, my opinion, due to the facts of the case and the facts that we didn't get. Like Jason said, there was no leaked documents, no leaked autopsy photos, no leaked videos, no leaked nothing. That's impossible. Even the OJ trial had shit leaking out the next day. Okay?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
The blood they found on the sidewalk with that glove, that was not there when the cops first got there, because the cop testified to that. That was all planted. And I think that knife sheath was planted. And the reason I asked you how long it was after the crime that they arrested him, because I thought if it was the same day, maybe they went to his house to get something with his DNA on it to put underneath the body, and that's why the coroner took so long getting there to the scene. But if it was a couple of months later, that ruined that whole thing. But now my other question is this. If he wore a Dickie suit into this, did this whole atrocity without leaving any epithelial cells or anything anywhere, how did he leave that fucking sheath with the fucking DNA on it? You know,
I don't have an answer to
that all down before he started the crime. If he had the foresight and the knowledge of DNA and how not to leave it, do you think he's that stupid that he's going to have anything on him that has his DNA on it that he's going to use in this crime?
I doubt it.
Not a friggin' chance.
You never know, but I doubt it.
You know,
but the bottom line is,
someone that particular
Ellie,
would not overlook that small detail.
No. But Ellie, this is the theater. Like, People, they want you to, hopefully, those of us that have not been following this case, especially very closely, they want, as you know, the public to look at the hearings and not look objectively. Well, wait a second. Even though I've been told he's done this crime over and over again or could have done it by corporate media, how? How could one person do stabbings, unalivings, when we know they were awake? Most of them were awake, if not every single one of the four. And you got 6'3", 6'4", handsome, strong Ethan Chapman. But they want to say, well, they stabbed him, he was asleep, and they started on his lower legs. What a bunch of bullshit. Even if he was asleep, he'd be fighting for his life.
It was he, right? So what are they saying, they?
He.
It was he. That's what I mean.
Don't know.
None of this makes fucking sense. The language they're using compared to the crime they're trying to say happened doesn't match. So,
and the timing, people new to the case, excuse me, Ali, they're going to not question, of course, what we've been saying a lot, of course, is it was about 8 minutes to 12 minutes, if that this person or perps had time to do all of the stabbings and get out. Again, you're leaving two roommates alive. You got the delayed 911 call. If you actually think a crime scene really happened the way we've said, that these girls, again, are unalived and Ethan, then explain, why would two roommates be left alive? Why would a 911 call be delayed 8 or 9 hours? And it's not because of one big creator that said, well, the assailants, I think they intimidated Bethany and Dylan. As you said, no, if it's gangbangers, whoever the people left alive, that would be calling 911 after about an hour or two, right? Especially you got two girls, and they're ferocious girls. These girls aren't whippy little willows, man. Dylan's like 6 foot. They got strong personalities. Overall, very good human beings. They would have called 911 after an hour or two. That's reason, logic, common sense, folks. Right? Come on, 8 or 9 hours till and then no mention of blood of Xana around the body when they first discover supposedly Xana splayed out on the ground. Can you explain that, folks? No mention of blood. We all know the 911 was coerced, but how about adding that little bit of information? A lot of YouTube creators, Ellie, some will mention it, but a lot don't with big channels. Mention like Harsh Reality. Come on, Harsh. Have you ever mentioned that? Why was there no blood mentioned in the 911 call? There's blood everywhere. I don't think he's ever brought that up. But anyway, Harsh is a good guy, but geez, come on.
The thing that gave it away too, and kind of proves your theory, is the fact that they destroyed that house.
Oh, yes, that's right. Exactly.
They can't re-rent it because there's no blood anywhere, and people will look for evidence and shit. So they had to bring it all down and get rid of it. And I'll bet you they burned every fucking bit of rubble.
I bet you're right. Or sold it.
Probably burned it. Was so out of character because normally they wait till after the trial or after the guilty plea or whatever. So it's a steam deal because they might be able to get more evidence of questions that come up during trial and send the police or investigators back to whatever. I've never seen them tear down a house prior to the trial or the plea, ever.
No, never have I either, Ellie. I just wanted to add to your point.
They had
sure. Yep. But the university establishment, as part of that emotionally, again, constantly high charge narrative, right? The PSYOP, folks, is part of the PSYOP, in my opinion. The university establishment's excuse was, what wasn't it, in law enforcement, and some of the city council was, well, we didn't want the house. We're debating whether or not, even before it was torn down, we're not sure if the house should stand up any longer, right? I understand one thought. They think, well, we don't want the students, constantly going by and thinking about this atrocity if you believe it happened, right? Yeah. But wait a sec. You got to put those emotions away. If those students are going to be emotionally scarred, it's up to the parents and to have dialogue, I would think, with their sons or daughters and say, is this really bothering you? If it is, okay, you're going to have to move, honey, because the crime scene, you know what? It's more important than your emotional state right now. We have to have the house up. The university, law enforcement, the judicial system has to keep the house for the trial. What's that?
We could have put boards up around it until after the trial.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I never thought of that.
Or
that's right.
I can see their vision of tearing it down. I wouldn't want it there either because it's a bad stigma. But
So are I.
they couldn't have it there because people would be wanting to rent it. It would become famous, and people would want to go in there looking for any trace of this or trace of that or whatever. So they can't have that. They destroyed the house long before the trial or plea happened, which is just out of character. Any law enforcement or anything, they would not release that house until that after they know they don't need it anymore for the trial. Normally, that's why they keep the house up for the trial. And like I say, this whole case just went south. Okay? They destroyed the house. They done the plea. And now they don't have to release anything or do a trial. And none of us are going to find out, well, they think that this was a fucking psyop.
Absolutely, Ellie. And you know what? Ellie, I was looking forward. I don't know. What about you? I was really looking forward to this trial.
Yeah.
If for no other reason, to see the dollhouse, the 3D printed dollhouse, though, that they had to replace the house. And it was so funny and pathetic. My friends, you got to laugh. The jury, the defense and the prosecution, as I said to Ellie in our interview recently, that they laughed. They actually laughed about this. They knew how ridiculous that you've destroyed a real house with supposedly 4 unalivings, and you're going to use a 3D printed dollhouse instead. I mean, folks, you have been played. You have been hoodwinked from the get-go. And during these hearings, please understand that in our opinions, okay? The facts back it up, though, folks. And I'm telling you, the state, elements of the FBI, we're not done with them yet. This is only, in a way, just begun. For those of us that want to spend some energy, but bring truth and transparency more as to the discrepancies of this all-important case, it's not over yet, folks. It may be over for Brian. Again, he'll be, but not unalived. He'll be out the back door, like Ellie said, I believe. But it's not over for what really happened. We can all know it, my friends. It didn't happen the way we've been told, and I don't believe again. We don't have to feel sad, overly sad for these 4. They are alive, in my opinion. And really, if you look at the facts, again, and one other thing, Ellie, before I forget this live, like I keep saying, everybody, you don't have to take my word for all this. Look it up yourselves, folks, because it relates to the IDAHO4. I think you may agree that the feds can legally stage a violent event such as this if a confidential informant has been compromised. Think about that, everybody. Is that the IDAHO4? Is that the real truth on November 13th? You know, you had surveillance all around the house and the neighborhoods. You had patrols. Ellie spoke about the band field, which isn't far from the house. I believe Maddie's jacket, though, as Ellie talked about, though, I think that, though, that was planted, that was most likely. Maybe not, but... Pardon?
That was Zayna Canoodle's sweater. That was
Zayna Canuto. Thank you for that correction. Thank you for that correction. But again, my friends, the feds can legally stage a violent event. And I think that's exactly what we saw. A lot of staging, folks. A lot of staging, okay? And again, Steve G, there's a lot of questions about it. Pardon me?
A complicated psyop that failed.
I love that. Complicated psyop that failed. Maybe we should have that in a title one day. Complicated psyop that failed. IDAHO4 question mark. That's great. I love it.
There you go. Okay, well, I got to cut this short because I have to run out to the res today. But so I'm glad we were able to get.
This is great. Enjoy your drive to the res. It's a beautiful day for it.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that. It's a very beautiful day. Luckily.
Thanks for joining me, everyone. Again, after this,
everyone for being here. Yeah.
When my YouTube audience sees this, I just want to say, if I may, real quick, Ellie, thank you very much. Thank you very much again for this interview, Ellie. And it's always great talking with you. And we're waking up a lot of people. I could see it by the comments, the views. And let's keep it going if you're up for it. And everybody on YouTube, of course, please, if you enjoy my videos, I hope you subscribe. Thanks to all my subscribers thus far. We're almost at 400. We're getting close. Thank you for all your comments, engagement, and smash that like button. Maybe Ellie will put that in a nice edit again, a smash sign, and hit the, what's that?
I can do it.
And hit the bell. Hit the bell icon to be notified for future videos. And again, leave me a comment. It all helps with the algorithms, everybody. Certainly, I'm not perfect in this case with research, but I think I'm getting pretty damn close to what really went down on November 13th, describing with Ellie and to all of you out there. And we can all look objectively and come to our own conclusions. These are our opinions. But again, connecting the dots, I think the facts back it up. I won't say any more. Thank you so much again, Ellie, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I'm Estes Crime Maze. I love all of you, and you look beautiful, by the way. Not me, you.
Have a good one. Okay. So in closing, I just want to say, I'm putting a challenge out there, okay, to any creators who would like to come in and challenge us on our theory. We are open to do so. It's the other side who are not open to have us on their show. So with the exception of Tommy Jude, he's had Jason on a couple times, which is cool. But understand something. I'm issuing a challenge to people to come in and prove that crime happened. Prove us wrong. I'll gladly say I was wrong. And I seen this wrong, and Jason will admit he was wrong. If you can prove to us everything we're saying you can't prove, i.e. the crime happened, i.e. where's the bodies, i.e. why no open caskets, i.e. why did the mother say that she just bought a house, i.e. all the things that were overlooked, the 3 guys in the park, everything, just everything about this case, and the fact that they tore the houses down, and what happened with this guilty plea. Come in and prove us wrong. I challenge you. I will gladly have you on and give you your say. And with no malice, no ganging up on anybody, we'd love to have you interact and give us your thoughts. Anyway, from Jason at Estes Crime Maze and from Ellie at Ellie's Place, I bid you a good day. And thank you everyone for joining us. And thank you everyone who watches after.